So talk to me, tell me.
I don't know what's wrong with
I'm going live in 30 seconds. And we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what will be a very, very interesting presentation and roundtable. My name is James Francis. I will be your facilitator for today. We, as I said, have a presentation on a very interesting report around financial enablement in the African market, as well as a panel discussion / roundtable to follow it, in which you are welcome to engage with our three panelists to find out more about this fascinating topic. And the topic for today is the human face of banking's future. And it is a very pertinent topic. I will touch on that in a second. Just a few housekeeping rules at first. As you're in attendance, there is a chance you could be asked a question at the end of the session, but more so, I do encourage you to engage with our panelists and ask them questions as well. You can do that using the hand raise feature in Teams. If you raise your hand during the panel discussion, I'll bring this up again at that point, then I will reach out to you and you can chat to our panelists. This session will be recorded, so please note that anything here is constituted as on the record. And then lastly, we would like you during especially the panel discussion to turn your video on so we can see you. You don't have to, but it would be nice to put a face to the comments that we will hear from this. With that being said, thank you for joining us today. As I said, the human face of banking's future. Now, one of the key tenets, if you've ever looked into Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, is he pointed out that stockpiling wealth, mercantilism, it doesn't work. That's not wealth. Wealth is what you do with capital. It's how you move capital. It's what you have access to. And we are talking then specifically about banking. And yet, according to World Bank data, nearly 2 billion people lack access to conventional financial services. A lot of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is the conundrum for banks. How do you access these people? What do they want? Who are they? How do you address them, especially in the modern paradigm of digital technology, of accessibility, of challenger banks? There are many factors at play here, and we will be unpacking this today. So I would like to introduce our panelists for today. We will be hearing from Idris Kolabai. He is a transaction services business leader as well as the African director for Finastra. We will also have Mary Connor, who is the retail banking product management head at Finastra, and then Paula Zuccotti, who is a designer, ethnographer, trends forecaster, and visual artist, and the power behind this fantastic report that we're going to hear of. But first, let's find out a bit more about Finastra and the journey to this report, which I did in conjunction with ITWeb. And for that, I would like to hand over to Mary Connor. Mary, thank you for joining us today. And please, over to you.
Thanks very much, James. I'm sorry, but the slides don't seem to be moving along. Could somebody take control and please move them? Thank you. Just bear with us for one moment. So these are the panelists. So Idris, as James just mentioned, myself, Mary Connor. I'm a director in the retail banking product management at Finastra, and banking technology has been my whole working life. And finally, last but certainly not least, Paola Zuccotti, who is the author and researcher behind this report. So now if we just go on just to some unique factors about this report, and it's the first ethnographic study of its kind, so it's very unique. And what we wanted to achieve out of this is to understand the consumer mindset about the current state of digital banking, and essentially uncover the barriers and perception issues that are limiting consumers' adoption of innovative products and services. And also to uncover what financial empowerment means and how we can use the learnings from this report. When I say we, I mean, fintechs and banks, how we can use them towards delivering a more meaningful experience and relationships for the end consumers, which are the bank's customers. I think the overriding thing that's come out of it is that people want banking to be done their way, within their limits and according to their timings. And at the heart of it all is personalization. From a Finastra perspective, what we've learned from this report will inform and influence what we do at Finastra, what we do and what we develop. And in doing that, we need to help banks and financial institutions, because not all banks are delivering, not all are delivering financial services. There are other types of financial institutions that do exactly that. But we need to be enabling them to meet and exceed their customers' expectation by providing that meaningful experience. And also at Finastra, we do this on an ongoing basis. We benchmark our developments and to ensure that they meet the expectations not only of the banks, but of the banks' end consumers. So that's just a little bit of a backdrop to the report. I'm now going to hand over to Paola Zuccotti, and I'm going to let Paola, as the key person behind the delivery of this report, introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paola Zuccotti. I'm an ethnographer and trends forecaster, and I work with major consumer brands as an external consultant, helping them create a vision to develop future products and services. And I do that as an ethnographer and trend forecaster, immersing myself in the life of others in order to uncover people, consumer, user insights that can inform the development of these products. I'm also a visual artist, and you can see here I'm the author of this book called Everything We Touch, a 24-hour inventory of our lives by Penguin Random House. And on this book, I travel the world photographing people's physical footprint by telling their stories of their life just by simply showing all the objects they touched in one day. And the other images that you see here on the screen is a project, independent project that I launched during lockdown, in which I put a call out asking people to share the 15 objects that were essential to their lives during COVID-19. And the idea was to create an archaeological archive called Future Archaeology of a Global Lockdown to explain how our lives changed and to understand our behavior and what was key during them. So I'm showing you this because this is relevant to our project here at Finastra. And now I'm going to start by giving you a very small introduction about ethnography, just so we are all in the same picture. What does ethnographic research mean? Ethnographic research means understanding the world from the point of view of others. As an ethnographer, my mission is to view the world how others do. So it's not about me, just simply understanding someone and making sense of someone. It's about making sense of how someone makes sense. And this is really important because if we understand how people feel, we will then understand how they think. If we understand how they think, we understand what they believe. And why is this so important? Because one person's beliefs informs their behaviors, informs their priorities, informs their values. So it doesn't mean that we have to agree with what the person's saying. One of the first things that I'm going to tell you is, like, I hear a lot that people are really distrustful of governments and institutions. So this is not for us to say, why are they distrustful? Is it right? Is it not? They will say institutions are corrupted. So is it my role to judge that? No, my role is to say, well, if they think this way, they believe that, and that explains why they behave the way they do. So the amazing thing about studying and having a conversation with someone about finances is, like, finances touch every aspect of our lives. Our finances have to do with our family, our work, our education, our health, our community, and our future and our dreams. So it's such an important topic. So by discussing finance with all our interviewees, I was able to understand so many aspects of their lives and the key and important role that finance plays in someone's. And as James mentioned at the beginning, it's not about how much money you have, and it's not about wealth, it's about optimizing your situation to the best you can. So how do people feel? What was the sentiment coming out of the interviews? People felt really distrustful of governments and institutions. They talk about years of corruption. And they also felt defeated as citizens. They said, we don't know our own rights sometimes. They felt even uncomfortable sometimes about the payment of their taxes because they don't see that return on the roadworks and constructions and hospitals and schools that they were promised. There was like a bitter feeling when talking about this. And also they felt hit really hard by the pandemic. This project that we are conducting with Finastra is global. So being hit hard by the pandemic is being felt in every country in the world, more or less. Particularly people in Africa felt so unprepared. They felt they did have no means to cope with this level of uncertainty. People lost their jobs. Unemployment went high. And I heard this a few times. When there is unemployment, there is hunger. When there is hunger, there is poverty. When there is poverty, there is crime. And that crime then manifests as fear. Fear for your own life, fear for the life of your community, fear for the future. Also uncertain about that future, people's jobs were put on hold, people's business were put on hold, people's plans were put on hold. And it was a difficult situation to live with. But also at the same time, they say, you know what? We are really resilient. We are very hardworking, and we have a strong community, and we rely on our community a lot. Also, what happened, like the pandemic also affected the way in which people congregated together as places of worship were closed. There were no family gatherings. So also they felt a little bit vulnerable that in the way that they would normally deal with uncertainty, they couldn't rely on that so much. So when talking to people about their financial goals, like what do you want? What is your dream? It got to the point that so many people were expressing that because this system they live with, sometimes they find the system is very unfair. So even they told me things like COVID taught us gratitude, but also taught us that you could have a stable job. Even having a stable job, which is seen as something really strong and positive, was not good because your boss would fire you, would kind of like reduce your amount of time. So people even didn't feel the security of having a safe job wasn't the most secure thing. So this, with seeing that they live within a system that is not fair, started to drive this desire of buying themselves out of the system, independency from it. So the more you are in control of your life and the less you are relying on others, government institutions, bosses, companies, is how you are going to survive out of this. So people wanted recognition, visibility, to be listened to. Sometimes they talk so much about that, and I'm going to give you examples in a minute. And also empowerment. Why empowerment? Because they have dreams, but sometimes they feel powerless about these dreams. And I'm going to share on this slide here. This is a pyramid of that you will find all the details on the report that we are working with Finastra. And this is the journey to financial empowerment. And it applies to our global report. And every country will have a different flavor or a different tone to it. Why is this so important? Because this journey to financial empowerment is very related to the relationship that people have with their banks. Because traditionally, our finance and the way we look after our money is related to the banks and the banks we bank with. What did we find out? That these were the very important pillars to that empowerment. Why? Because empowerment is about feeling stronger and confident to achieve what we want to achieve and to be in control of our lives. But because of the relationship people have had with the banks for so long, they feel they do not have the knowledge to take control of their finances. And why they don't have the knowledge? Because not everybody gets educated in finance, not even through school sometimes. And they don't understand the relationship with the bank, and they don't understand the language the bank speaks to. And this is like, I'm going to make a parenthesis here to say, when we speak about banks, for so many people, the idea of a bank is a branch. Oh, no, we are talking about banking and we all understand what banking means. But people refer to banks informed by that idea of going into a branch. So when they say, I dislike banks, what they are actually disliking is the idea of going to the branch, queuing for hours, taking a while to be seen, not even able to have the conversation, not addressing the problems, not understanding the language. So that's the knowledge they need and the education to be able to take control of that part. After that is controls. I need the tools to manage my finance. And because they've been going to the branch for a while and they haven't been able to be in control of the situation, they also felt that the bank was in control. They don't feel they have the control and the tools, which actually many digital apps here are helping us because they are giving that control back to the people. And once they have the knowledge and once they have the control, then they have the freedom that comes from having the services in place that let you take control of those things so you can then start to enjoy your life, gain the benefits of banking, and take advantage from that. And very importantly, with personalization, as Mary mentioned, my way, I am at the center of the banking equation. So personalization doesn't mean to receive a letter, hello, Paula, how are you doing today, or the bank statement being addressed on my name. Personalization means that I dictate the way I bank. So when I mentioned earlier that my work as a visual artist and I put emphasis on the work with objects, that introduction was to tell you that not only we had a conversation with the people that we interview, but we asked them to source 7 objects in their homes that represented their financial goals and their financial mindset. So in the report, you're going to find these lovely pictures taken by the people with the explanation of what each object means for them. So in the benefit of time, I'm picked 6 examples, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of information so you can hear these stories, not from my voice, but from the people's voice. So here we have Nicole from South Africa. Nicole is 22, and she's a customer service agent. She's a single mom and lives with her aunt, her son, who is 10 years old, and her grandma. So in the report, you're going to find the page. Here it's all put together for the benefit of sharing the information in once. But you're going to have a page called Moments of Truth. That Moments of Truth talks from the people, those moments that they are revealing something that we didn't know and is very insightful from us in the for us in the industry. And here on the right, you have the picture of Nicole, the one she selected. And on the left, you have all the banks that Nicole banks with and why she chooses one bank over another one. So something like Nicole said is like, I baked to compensate. She lives in Orlando West, and she talked how her community was destroyed. There was a lot of elderly in the community, people in poverty. Her job was cut to half of the times. So on the weeks that she didn't make an earning, because she's the breadwinner of the house, on the weeks that she didn't make an earning, she baked to compensate. So she baked amawinia cakes, and she would stand outside of the supermarket to sell them. And that was the way for her the way of coping. That's why on her financial picture here on the right, you see the cakes. Also, you see the SASA card there, which is the grandma's pension. So she's putting that card on the picture to tell us that she is the breadwinner, and she also has to look after the grandma because the pension is not enough. The trainers represent the health of her finance, etc. But interestingly here to draw about Nicole is Nicole has a stock bell with all her family. And for the very first time, they use a bank to organize a stock bell. And it's been a lifesaver for Nicole because she was the only one banking within the aunties and the grandmas. So she used to collect the cash and then put the money of the stock bell herself in a bank, but in her bank account, not in a special stock bell account. But they opened one with time, which promised them a 7% saving, 7% interest rate on their savings. So they're very excited about that. So Nicole introduced the whole family to the time stock bell plan. And actually, one of the features that she loves is like all the grandmas and the aunties who are, she even says some illiterate, can go into the pick and pay stores at the points at the supermarket and make their contribution there. So everybody's having access, and it's not her the one taking control of everybody's stock belt, but the family all can do it themselves. And she really praised this accessibility. You can see, I'm going to spend less time on the other people, but we'll use this one as an example. You can see the beads there. Those beads in the photo are what Nicole put as these are the beads that we are going to wear on our family celebration when we all get together at the end of the year to celebrate, and we will use the 7% extra of the stock bells to celebrate our achievements. And she said, that's like a Thanksgiving, and that's what I will be wearing in that celebration. And last point about Nicole, she talked about clarity and information, give her confidence and empowerment. And I'm going to read this quote to make it justice. FNB, which is her main bank, she says, FNB is a trustworthy bank. I've taken a loan with them and was able to repay it without pressure. They they really help you. The app, listen to this, the app is much better than the people at the branch. I'm fascinated because I get a lot of information on most things that I didn't know existed, like trading, for example. And then she mentions Time. With Time, I was skeptical because they don't have a branch, but the website had everything I needed, all explained very simply. It was the clear, straightforward information that gave me confidence. Using Time Bank for the stock bell is a trial run for me. If it goes okay, I will start using them for my personal banking too. So what's very important here? Digital apps, like in this case, she mentions the FMB, is bringing all that knowledge and all that control that we were talking at the beginning at a very accessible democratic level, where she doesn't have to wait for the people at the branch to explain things to them that she cannot even request of because she's not even aware that she could do trading. But the app is bringing all that knowledge to the fingertip, and she feels very, very empowered. Following that, the website of Time gave her all the information and the clarity to trust an institution that did not have a branch. Moving to the next one from South Africa, Nchuko, 35. He's an unemployed marketeer who has recently started a home renovations company. But the most important thing to highlight here about Nchuko, although he talks highly about unemployment, and he has two quotes here. He said, unemployment aggravated by the effect of lockdown it had hit very hard. Well, the effect of lockdown in our economy had increased unemployment. People are realizing that, yes, you can have a stable job, but anything can happen. So they rather have something they are in control of than being dependent on a company or organization. We are all looking for independency. You have to think of innovative ways to make, there is somebody with a microphone on, if you don't mind switching off, please. We are all looking for independency. We have to find a way, an innovative way to make things work for ourselves. He also referred to how frightening the large unbanked population was in South Africa. And he didn't realize that until he saw the large queues of people at the post office queuing to receive the government grants because of COVID. And then there is a very, very poignant message here that I will read to you. And he says, there is no need for communication with the bank. I ignore their messages. I avoid going to the bank. There really isn't a need for it. I can do everything with the FMB app. I don't even know how much interest I earn from my savings because that's not the reason why I have my money in the bank. I just don't want to have it physically on me, so I don't spend it. The bank sends me a lot of instant messages with advertising, which I ignore the most. Also, I studied marketing, so I know they were trying to do. I'm more educated than them, so I ignore them. Look at Nchuko's page here. Unlike photo. Unlike Nicole, who was more in control of her situation, his one is completely aspirational, and it's nothing wrong with aspirations, but how far is from unemployment to wants to have that car, to be as rich as Kanye West, and to buy yourself designer trainers. Moving to the next slide, and I'm going to go through anyway. We have time for questions. Here we're talking about Kenya. So we have Lydia, who is a maternity nurse and an essential worker. So although she saw a lot of changes in her community, she saw how the dynamics of the community changed completely, how unemployment increased, but also how people started to be more entrepreneurial, and everybody started to develop new businesses in food and agriculture. And we call Lydia the queen of chamas because Lydia has a chama for everything. And why does she do that? Because she compartmentalizes all her aims. So she has a chama for food and basic house necessities, one for furniture, one for traveling up country to see her family, one for anything that may happen in her community. So the chamas are giving Lydia the confidence that her money is purposely placed and looked after. If she had it all in the bank, she would lose control of them. But this way is being taken care. She loves the chama community because she gets ideas from them. The chama community empowers her. It teaches her things that she didn't know. And she highlights how chamas are about appreciation, recognition, and reputation. If you don't pay or if you don't do your job, everybody's in your neck and you don't want that embarrassment. And that was something really, really interesting that we can learn from the chamas, although like we all know and understand them, how important they are on recognizing people's efforts and how accountable people are. So when people tell us that they feel invisible towards their bank, this is something to remember. And the next example from Mike, here, who is a beautician and a massage therapist, imagine his business completely distraught during COVID because he couldn't even meet his customers, and he is an independent business owner. He talked about how the pandemic separated them, but he also said something interesting, that the unbanked population has not got the concept. He is banked, and he thinks that the unbanked population is missing out. However, I'm going to only read you the quote that he says, what empowerment means to him, because it's so poignant. Being financially empowered is a way of raising me and taking me to a higher level. For example, I've been a loyal customer of the bank, so they might decide to empower me and give me an offer because I've been faithful and loyal. Maybe through a conversation, they realize that I have dreams, but my financial status cannot make those dreams come through. So they increase my borrowing to empower me to do the projects I'm inspiring to. The bank recognizes I'm hardworking, faithful, and loyal. So although he respects banks and he doesn't understand why other people don't have a bank, he feels so invisible, and he feels that he doesn't have this opportunity, and the bank is not appreciating his dreams, therefore is not empowering him. And to close with our two last examples from Nigeria, here we have Damilola, who is an accountant, but she lives off a food stall at the market. And this is the photo of her food stall and the things that she picked for her photo. And it was kind of like quite interesting to read that her objects are those cans of tomato cans, empty, like 1, 2, 3, and that relates to her income. If people come to the stall and the market and only want to buy that tin of rice, that's one income, that's another income, that's another income. So how her income was so fluctuating on what actually people were buying that day at the market. And here we are governed by corruption leaders. In Nigeria, we don't have good governments like other countries do. We don't know our rights. So we have to accept it because we don't know what to do. We show our support and pay taxes to show good citizenship, but we're still waiting. We strive for independence, which is a point that I made at the beginning too. She said, during the pandemic, we didn't get any government benefits. I studied accounting, so I know how to run my business and be independent. The lack of government support is the main reason why people want to be independent business owners. And she dislikes the banks. She used to bank with all the banks that you see on the side, but now she's getting by with the Alat wallet. I don't like going to the banks. It's very stressful. They're crowded. You have to queue, and they always tell you to come back another day. Sometimes they just debit money from your account without you knowing, etc. But that shows the sentiment towards the bank. And on my last example here is Olu, 26, who had a much kind of more positive attitudes towards banks. And she talked about how Nigerians are very resilient. Her business was put on hold. She was starting a cake parlor business, but cakes are a luxury and not necessity during COVID. So she completely lost in her business. Nobody was buying cakes from her. And I will show you the contrast between these two quotes. She loves banks, but look at what she's saying here. Banks are a waste of time. I don't go to the banks at all. I even do all my payments from my bed with the Zenith app. It is so easy to use. Everything is spelled out. Everything is on the main screen and on one tap. It does not give you any stress. I use the app for everything. So this is the point I made to you all at the beginning when she's telling us banks are a waste of time. She's actually saying branches are a waste of time. So the language is so important as well because people associate banking so much to that experience that they had about going to the branches before. And then as a positive message, she said, banks link you to the rest of the world. It's crazy not to have an account. And she says, a bank could be a backbone to them, helping them with debt and providing a credit card. It's so easy to have a bank account these days. I don't understand why people will reject an easier way of doing things. I usually threaten my hairdressers and the ladies at the market saying that I won't continue paying them cash, that they have to open a bank account. A bank is a modernity. It links you to the rest of the world. And to close with my last slide, which is the pyramid, and it refers to the African flavor of this pyramid. We talk about the journey to empowerment. What have we seen here, particularly on knowledge? We've seen an increase in accelerated digitalization. Totally, yes. During COVID, people were making more transactions digitally, not only the times that they interact digitally, but the things they started to do digitally. But sometimes, like the e-wallets and all those forms of payments, yes, they talk about financial inclusion, and they are great from a financial inclusion point of view, but not necessarily financial literacy. And all the benefits of using digital wallets and using digital payments like that also exclude the bank because the bank is sometimes not needed, it cuts that relationship. So there is a need here for nurturing knowledge and financial literacy. And the same again with controls. People felt that forever banks have been in control and they are not in control. So this dynamic has to change, particularly if we want to put people at the center. But we're seeing positive effects here, like how these digital bank apps are making the system more accessible. They are giving people more control. They are giving people the power, and they're putting things at the same level where they feel not intimidated and not that shy to go into the bank to ask for the things that sometimes they wouldn't be able to do face to face. And then finally, the freedoms. People are unable to enjoy financial freedom within the system, so people want to buy themselves out of it. So either we help them being on the system, or we help them do these entrepreneurships and these ideas that they want, because it's all about empowerment and helping people fulfill those dreams. And if you follow the color coding of our arrows, we see how banks are getting people just a little bit on the way, but they are failing and taking people through the whole journey. We've seen the examples in other parts of the world with challenger banks and digital banks, because of what we mentioned before, helping people getting more along the way. And in green, we have the Stockwells and Chamas, because the Stockwells and Chamas are giving people the knowledge and control. And although it's not within the system that we're talking about, it's a great example for us of emerging behavior, understanding how the system works outside of the system. So I thank you all for your time, and forgive me for rushing through, but it was really important that we share this knowledge with you in this little short time. So I'm going to hand over to Mary, please.
Thank you very much, Paula. A whistle-stop tour through the research and the report, which we will be publishing very soon. I think I need to be just saying that we have a number of customers who are already thinking about this, outside in thinking in terms of their consumers, about giving them the knowledge and the control so that they have the freedom to feel empowered. So financial institutions are redefining their sense of purpose. And I just want to refer here to Banco CTT. Nuno Fernandes, who's the COO of Banco CTT. Banco CTT is a bank, one of the leading banks in Portugal, and it uses Finastra software. In fact, Finastra software stands up the whole bank. And we spoke to him back in March about what concerned him most about his bank and remaining relevant. And he said that was one of the things that keeps him awake at night, this quest for relevance. How does he make his bank an embedded part of his consumers' lives? And how do Banco CTT build products and services that people want to talk about? And he was very, very passionate about this. But not only Nuno at Banco CTT. Forrester also says that financial services providers need to redefine their sense of purpose and adopt more socially responsible and sustainable business models, and ultimately put customers' financial well-being at the core of their strategy. But also, not only Forrester, Gartner are saying something similar. Helping customers meet their financial needs reduces their risk to banks and credit unions. And also, when customers receive help from their financial providers, they often reward their providers with positive growth actions, positive reviews, and purchasing new products, because now they are relevant. And what we have seen at Finastra is that you can only deliver this kind of relevance and meaningful experience with modern technologies and digital capabilities. And in our world, COVID has been an accelerator of the demand for digital and open banking capabilities, because a lot of established banks have a legacy behind the scenes and don't have connected up processes that deliver those meaningful and relevant experience to their end consumers. When you look at the challenger banks, they are unencumbered by legacy, and they've been able to zoom in on innovative niches to deliver that meaningful experience. It doesn't mean that established banks are going to become irrelevant, because what we're also seeing is that they are starting to up their game. So if we just move on and just want to talk about what we at Finastra are doing. So you see up the top here, we've got Fusion Essence, which is our next generation banking solution. And we have here, it's about, we call it surfing the wave of next generation banking, because what we are seeing is an upswing in demand for modern technology and digital capabilities. And we are doing this with Fusion Essence. We're providing end-to-end digital capabilities, and we're providing this sort of meaningful experiences by way of our digital engagement layer, and also with our open banking capabilities. And we complement this on the digital front end side with wallet, chatbot, and Islamic capabilities. And just to give you an example, very, very recently, I think it's less than 2 months ago, a wash bank in Ethiopia went live on the latest version of Fusion Essence. They were now providing the kind of capabilities that really appeals to their end consumers. And this is what next generation banking can deliver for your banks. It can give you the ability to give the knowledge to your customers and put them in control and give them the freedom. And if you do that, then you remain relevant and they'll buy and talk about the products and services that you deliver. So on that note, I want to just move on, because we are going to now open up a discussion to sort of explore the views and explode some of the myths around banking. And to that end, I'm going to hand over to James Francis, who's going to lead in on the roundtable discussion. James, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mary and Paula, for a very, very interesting study there, a very interesting report. I like how it profiles the individual banking users. And I suppose we tend to not realize that even though banking is in a digital transition, there's also a cultural transition that has to take place here in order to expand. So with that being said, the protocol for this is I do have questions prepared for our guests, but I would also like to invite the rest of the attendees. If you would like to ask our panelists a question, please just use the hand raise feature. If you can also turn your cameras on that we can see you, that would be great. We'd really appreciate that. And let me start then by asking our panelists. Let me first just reintroduce them. You've now met Paula Zuccotti, who is the designer and presenter of the report, as well as Mary Connor, a retail banking product manager at Finastra, and then Idris Kolobai, the recent new managing director of Finastra in Africa. Congratulations on that, Idris. Welcome to the continent. I'm sure you've been here many, many times in order to get to take that position. Let's start by asking our panelists, in terms of the challenges that you see banks facing out there for them to connect with customers, to have personalized offering. It's a question I'd like to pose to the rest of our attendees as well, but I want to start with you guys. What do you see amongst your customers? What do you see in the market in terms of challenges banks are going through, both for financial empowerment and for creating loyalty of their customers?
So maybe let me start this up here, right? So from our perspective, I think what we are seeing from the banking environment to a large extent is that the space is getting a lot smaller. The fintech population is growing a lot more. They are testing some of the niches in terms of where these banks typically played in the past, and they're literally doing what we say is coming off the top, or getting the nice portion out, and then obviously the backing components are still being left for the bank. So by using the niche components, what we're seeing in the fintech environments and with banks is that clients are have a lot more choice going forward. And when they have a lot more choice means that there's a lot more on offering. And the only way to compete with that is then effectively looking to reduce margins in terms of fees and that you could charge. And that unfortunately doesn't bode well for banks, especially when in a market where you're looking for digitalization and you're looking for automation. And we say all these things, but these things don't come for free, unfortunately. They do come at a cost to banks. So what we are seeing is that there is a huge population out there that now is spoiled for choice. And again, it's about how banks now start addressing the spoiled for choice and who do they partner with and how do they partner and what do they take forward in terms of from the clients.
Fantastic. Thank you, Idris. Let me see if I can get one of our guests to also chat about this. If I can ask Ms. Shasika Singh, you are the head of digital at African Bank. Do you agree with Idris's comments there? Is the question that it's really a buyer's market at the moment and trying to reach those customers even while trying to maintain healthy margins? Is that a big challenge for banks today?
Good afternoon. I believe yes, it is definitely a very big and a very real challenge for financial institutions. What, especially within an African bank scenario, the problem that we have is, as much as we are doing all the right things from a digital enablement perspective, we have a problem with adoption. And it is a bit of a difficult situation to be in, because our branches and our call centers have actually been ranked #1 in terms of servicing in South Africa. So it does present a huge challenge to try and convince a client to move away from a channel that services them well into a channel that is relatively unknown for them. And that's basically the challenge that we have at the moment.
Thank you very much, Asika, on that. Mary, maybe I can bring you in on that point. As she pointed, the adoption, getting people to encourage them to take on these services can be a challenge. Is there anything in terms of best practice or even technology that you found that can kind of build a momentum there, kind of encourage people to consider alternatives?
I think there's a number of things, but I'm just going to focus on two things. One is the user experience itself. It needs to be very ergonomic and intuitive. We've all used channels, whether it's internet or mobile, where things are in the wrong place, there's too much text on the screen, people get bored, it makes it look complicated when in fact it isn't. So there's a lot of improvement that can be made in that area. The second point I would make is, and this goes back, it really actually hits into the heart of the report, where it's talking about meaningful experience. There are many fintechs out there that are providing a contextual engagement software, and banks, I believe, need to connect that into their channels. Too often, I mean, in my own personal experience, I get offers which are completely irrelevant for me. And so you completely switch off because you think, well, actually, this bank doesn't know me. I'm not getting pulled in. The experience needs to be magnetic. And if it's not magnetic, people won't buy into it, because humans are creatures of habit, and they ultimately will resist change to an extent. So you need to make it as easy as possible for them.
Thank you, Mary. Paolo, maybe I can bring you in on that point. I found very interesting about your research that there is a bit of a gap between the expectations of customers and then what banks are trying to deliver into the market. You could see some of them were relatively happy and some of them not quite happy at all. What could you say from the report indicates the kind of cultural lessons that banks maybe should look at if they want to engage modern audiences more and kind of build up that adoption? And that's both on incumbent customers for new channels, as well as new customers who really didn't use the channels previously.
Yes, well, first of all, as a designer myself, I completely agree with Mary's point about great user experience, but we are talking about adoption where they haven't even realized that it's a great user experience there, to your point. So education is at the core, not only education from kind of like financial education, but education about the benefits, bringing people into, like, the idea they have is like stymied by years of an experience that they have with the branch. And I think a lot of work needs to be done there of putting banking on top of just an image of people have of going to the bank and going to the branch. And I think that is a key unlock, because when people talk about banking, they imagine that a scenario where they went to a bank and they've been talked down by the teller and they weren't able to express their own personal story and their own situation because that was irrelevant, because they weren't listened to, and they even didn't have the knowledge themselves to ask for what they need. like what we see on the examples, people are illiterate when it comes to that. So it's not to their power to go and ask the questions at the bank. So there is so much knowledge and education that needs to be done. And we have the opportunity of all the digital apps and everything that can be done digitally to level up and cut that barrier that they have from that those years of bad experience. So I think there is great potential now that people are on board, some of them, to start to spread the word that way and start bringing people in and give them power, give them knowledge, give them control, and put them at the center of that equation. So not personalized on their colors, or personalized, with their name, but really give them the tools so they can do banking themselves. They can set their limits, they can control their expenses, they can have visibility, etc., and goes on. But I think that's the main point, unlocking that perception they have of banking associated with a physical space.
Let's have a closer look at how the last 18 months has kind of impacted what happens. And I'd like to bring another attendee in. Mr. Mboneni Kise, you are the head of customer strategy at Old Mutual. Have you found it hard? Have you guys been challenged by trying to work out the new behaviors of customers in the last 18 months? What are some of the considerations you've had to take up since COVID happened in terms of engaging customers? Unfortunately,
James, sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
No, I think it's not unique to other organizations, specifically in the financial services, where the solutions that we provide are intangible. I think the digital arena, accelerating the digital space, making sure that our customers are able to engage with us digitally. It's one thing that has helped us because we're already on that journey. And as we then accelerate, and then we found it that customers more and more then are engaging with us. I think there was also a comment from one of the colleagues or one of the attendees here from Standard Bank, where traditionally you have got lots of branches. Then the challenge is because the customer behaviors now need to start changing. So the education around that becomes more imperative to change that kind of behavior and interact digitally. So I think it's not unique to us. The challenges have been quite the same across the industry.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Idris. Idris, maybe if you can expand on that. I'm seeing there's a recurring theme here that financial empowerment, financial education are important. Banks are on a digital journey. I will actually say, as an IT journalist, I believe the banks were fantastically proactive in terms of adopting digital technologies, taking ownership of it. But now they're kind of at a 2.0 or maybe even a 3.0 phase. How do we go beyond, the niceties of digital, and how do we actually empower people? From your perspective, what are ways to kind of bring that financial literacy through technology, but also through some of these channels we've been discussing?
Yeah, listen, I think, it was well said by the previous speaker, the previous attendee, in terms of, in the last 18 months, people had been forced to go digital. I mean, for the most part, people were locked in homes, with the numerous lockdowns as we're going. What we've seen over that period was the forced adoption of digital to a large extent, but it also gave, a lot of companies, and, I don't single out banks here specifically, but anyone in particular to become digitally, or to create a digital footprint for themselves. And it's about, I think Paula mentioned, it's about giving them the right level of education. Bombarding someone, as Mary said, with too many adverts, saying too much for them just becomes too much to a point where they start losing interest, and it's the glazed eyes and they're looking over it. But it's about the right content. And over the last 18 months, what we've seen is that people, if I had to think about myself, my Instagram profile has gone through the roof. My viewing of TikTok has gone crazy. My constant looking on web channels and those kind of things has really exploded, purely because there's just so much you could do indoors. You could just walk around the house so much times. So over what we are seeing in the banks, and we're really up to it, is effectively looking at about making sure that they set the right content about the ease of use of their services, some of the products that they're offering. And again, I think what a lot of the banks have at their disposal and not necessarily are using particularly well is the access to information that they have on their clients. In a payment message, there's just so much information that you can gather from it that you could, look at proper targeted message. So in one of the case studies that Paolo had gone through, and the one that stood out quite specifically, Mike in Kenya, he's been loyal to his bank. He's only banked with this bank, and he was expecting something back from them which wasn't forthcoming. Yet, if another participant had gone to him, they would have, given him extended credit terms, better banking, easier banking, free services. And it's about using that information and targeting using that information to what customers are actually looking for over this period. So I take it, the digital transformation, James, as you mentioned, is happening. Banks have always been on the forefront. We saw that with internet banking, we saw that with telephone banking, now mobile. And I think mobile is becoming very key as the platform of choice. I think it's one, right? I mean, it's there. People are sitting on their phones probably 12 hours a day. That's the mean that you can get to your customers.
Thank you very much for that. Let's go a little bit more on the single view of the customer, because that seems to be a big part of it. Before we do that, I'd just like to tell our attendees we still have about 10 minutes left. Please use the chat feature or the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask our panel any questions. It's a good time to grill them. They have a lot of experience in this topic, and I've obviously done the research for it. But before that, I wanted to bring in one of our attendees again, Mr. Mark Labuschagne. You are the Managing Director for Cash End to End. You guys are a business that will focus a lot on the customers. Is there a challenge building this kind of single view of the customer? Because that can be the holy grail of banking, but it doesn't seem to be something that the industry is getting right yet.
Quite right, James. The challenges around identifying customers in the digital space are significant because digitalization, if such a word exists, allows you to personalize down to the nth degree. Idris made comment around TikTok. If we look at our TikTok profiles, you can go down to very minute detail. You can't do that in a large banking application, especially in mass markets such as South Africa. So it becomes very, very difficult to personalize around the front end. Once you get customers into the back end of your operations, that's when you find the real detail and are able to deliver value and propositions that suit that customer profile. But you've got to understand them. You've got to learn about them. You've got to see what their patterns are like. What do they physically do? How do they operate digitally? When are they active? What tools and services do they use? And what are their profile interactions like? Because not only do they have personal needs, but they obviously also have business and other requirements. And those over time give you that capability. So the simple answer is that there's no solution up front that unlocks a personalization proposition. It's about understanding and working through the profiles, sifting reams of data to be able to craft a solution that will work for you in your paradigm and may look the same, but works for somebody else in a different paradigm because you personalized and tweaked something to make it work for them on that basis.
Thank you, Mark. Just to follow up on what you said, I'm just curious. You said that it's a question of it's hard in the front end, gets a bit easier on the back end. Is the problem getting a customer to engage with the right information, or is it more about sorting that data and making sure you have the right information? Where do you tend to find the bottleneck seems to happen?
Both of them, because the way that the law in this country is working is customers' data is being protected more and more, and the sharing and the analysis of that data is becoming more challenging. That's why I spoke to the transactional proposition, because that data which you create through your own use and own application obviously is yours to slice and dice as you need. But to get customers to tell you what they want or what they like, you get a personal view of something that somebody may have heard or may have understood to be a function, but doesn't really know what that function is and sends you down a rabbit hole. We believe very much in empirical data based on what we've seen through our customer proposition usage, as well as their behavior on our systems. We don't subscribe to the view of segmentation for the sake of segmentation or propositions according to segmentation. We look at a much more bespoke view based on what customers actually do.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. Let's unpack that a little bit. Paolo, I first want to go to you and ask, in terms of the research, What insight do we have in terms of what Mark just pointed out there, and both the customers giving their data? I suppose trust has a lot to do with it, but also the simplicity or complexity of the channels they're trying to engage with. What did you find out from customers, and perhaps their reluctance to become a more, shall we say, cohesive picture for their bank?
Well, a few things here, and I'm going to answer that from a kind of African and also global point of view, because they were quite similar. One, to close on the personalization, there were simple things that made people feel that that the app was personalized, for example, without having to go to kind of like design it for me. But example with challenger banks, the fact that people can set out their daily limit of how much they will spend and extend their limits, let's say, to $1,000 if that day they're about to buy an airline ticket, and lower the limit. Something so small like that gives people the idea of personalization and control. Or being the ones that say, my credit card got stolen, please order a new one. And that can happen in an instant, and the following day they can receive one. So that's the kind of like personalization that I'm referring from the research point of view, one that puts the person at the center of the equation. And to the comment about data, there was something really interesting, and particularly we observed this in the UK because we were able to explore things also like open banking and the use of these applications. Sometimes people are so, and forgive me to say this, they have so little expectations of what their bank is doing with their data, they are not afraid of thinking that the bank is going to do something they're not distrusting, because they say the bank is already having my data and is not using that data to my advantage, because they still get my profile wrong on the type of products they offer me and the communication that they send me. So what data am I giving away and that's going to be used by third parties or by somebody else if it's not being used smart already? And also there was an issue where, where some perks are being enjoyed and some benefits are being enjoyed, they weighed over that fear of sharing someone's privacy. We've seen it with challenger banks when they offer people access to products and services based on their spending behavior, or loyalty points based on what you do. There are some perks there that can be enjoyed, yes, over that fear of sharing one's data.
Excellent, thank you for that. We have some questions coming in from the audience as well. I'm going to give it to all of the panel, and you guys can step in to see. Jones Malakoane Jones is the senior business analyst at Africa Bank, and he is asking, is there any example of a bank from research that has mastered or excelled in all key areas or components of the triangle, being empowerment, financial, and freedom, as you presented, Paula? And if so, what was the secret to their success? Are there any examples yet of banks that have gotten this right?
Yes, without kind of like naming particular banks, we've seen how new challenger banks, and in the case of in Europe and the UK, and there would be like the N26 Monzo, Revoluts, have succeed as giving people that control. But there is a very interesting debate here, like, do they trust them? And trust is an important issue here. So we've seen examples where people will have, and I'm just using banks' names as an example here because we've done so many. Somebody may have an account, long life account with HSBC, and that's where their salary gets paid into, but conducts everyday transactions with Monzo. So which bank they trust? HSBC. Which bank they use? Monzo. So that's a very interesting point of view, because they consider Monzo, let's say, as a startup. So that's but it's with an amazing interface. So that's the one I want to use for my everyday interactions, but I'm not going to get my salary paid into that because I don't trust them to that level yet. My money is safe and my savings are safe with the big established banks. So it's not one over the other one. I think that there's been an opportunity here where it's on the consumer side to start to choose who they prefer doing one thing with the other one. We've seen the example, just to put it back to Africa, how I mentioned Time, and Time did so well at giving people the opportunity to open the Stockbells accounts and gave accessibility, and the clarity of the app and the website brought inclusion and empowerment from that level.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that insight. And there's an interesting point that very typical to a digital economy. There's no more one-stop shop, at least as the consumer is interested. Maybe Mary and Idris, if you can comment on that, because from my point of view, I've seen platform systems, API-based systems coming out of banks seem to be directed specifically at this idea. If banks cannot be in the foreground, the one-stop shop, they tend to want to create environments in the background that allows other constituents to work with them and provide services like accounting software, linking up with bank accounts and stuff like this. Is this a clear trend of the future? Is this if banks want to still be that everything, should they accept that it's going to be through a partner network that they facilitate?
So maybe if you don't mind, maybe I can go first here. So 100%, James. You would have seen, even in the local environment in the South African economy, many of the banks moving towards a platform journey. So we've seen two of the big four go that way. Just to go back to the earlier question, or the question in the question section, as well as the second question that sits there. We keep referring to banks, but importantly, if you're looking for some real case examples or where things are being done right, I mean, you don't need to look too far. I mean, look at what an Alibaba or an Amazon would do, where they are moving into the financial services, right? Are they getting the digital identities right? The way the Alipay model works is, they look at a 24/7 view of a client. What will you do when you wake up in the morning? What is the need, and how do you address those needs? And that's what they're doing. And it's not that they own everything, to your question in terms of platformication. It is that they partner with a financial institute. They partner with a loans and savings. They partner with an asset manager. So it is not really them that own it, but again, it's part of their platform journey, and that's how they're offering the services in terms of the life cycle of the customer or the consumer. So from when the person wakes up, what does he do? Does he want breakfast? Can we help you order it? Can we help you get an Uber? Can we, when you in the car, can we get you into your banking and financial platforms? And that's how they actually looking at those kind of components. So sometimes it's just about banks, and we've seen some banks that have done this right too. Again, what Paulo has mentioned, so you've seen Monzo, Revolut, N26, but even established banks. DBS in Singapore is a clear example in terms of how they've adopted digital transformation. What they've done, not just in the Singapore market, which is a vastly different market than Africa, but they're using the same principles in India, markets that are comparable. So there are these success stories that are floating around, and it's about what's relevant for your market segment specifically. Mary?
Sorry, just a little frustration there with the unmute button. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Aegis, and we see it though at different segments of the market in Europe. Yeah, but just going back to an example of a bank that's done well with this, I think it's Bradesco. They've really upped their game in terms of that magnetic. I go back to that magnetism of engagement, and they're doing that in South America, and it's worth checking them out and seeing what they're doing. Just going back one step, the key to all of this is APIs. Yeah. So what we do at Finastra is we're providing an end-to-end banking solution that is surrounded with an extensive set of APIs. And it's really what the GAFA group of companies have been doing for quite a number of years. I'm talking about the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, the Facebooks. They've been leveraging the power of APIs. And just to your question, James, about, when we look at, and this is a particular segment in the UK, the small to medium-sized enterprises, where they want to focus on a niche part of the market, but they want to kind of have an all-in-one banking experience. They want to be able to access invoice discounting, for example. They want to be access, an enterprise GL. Everything is going to be cloud. Everything is cloud. Everything's got to be API enablement, because that enables them to deliver the experience that they want, and it gives them the agility, but also gives them the ability to provide more targeted products and services for their end consumers.
Yeah. So James, just to add on to Mary, that last close comment. In Finastra, we have deployed a platform as well, where we are partnering with the wider ecosystem, whether it be universities, fintechs, in a technology or platform we call FusionFabric.cloud, and that effectively can sit as the top layer. Hooking onto your core banking applications, all API driven, but it opens up the need then, or it opens up the community in terms of partner ecosystems that you can join or that can join you. We've seen some huge successes in terms of people launching businesses off Fusion Fabric Cloud within, what would have taken 6 months in 4 weeks. We've seen 50% take up in a matter of days since launching. And those are the key platforms that, will enable banks to, start partnering with us on and effectively seeing the benefits in a near real-time basis.
Thank
just
you.
to piggyback
Yes,
on
Mary.
what Idris has said is that on the Fusion Fabric Cloud platform, and I would encourage everybody in the audience here to access that platform and look at the libraries of APIs and look at the accessibility that it provides. And one of the things I think it was mentioned in Paula's report is about customer ID, customer identification, authentication, the frustrations that consumers have with that. And we actually enhance that experience through collaboration with fintechs that actually sit on our Fusion Fabric Cloud platform.
Thank you very much, Mary and Idris. We're out of time, so let's close it off. But when is the report due? How can the attendees get a copy of it? How can they contact you guys to find out more?
Hello, sorry, is that to me, James, or
to the panel? Yes, just
yeah.
yeah.
Well, the report is due imminently. And we will ensure that anybody that's part of this forum gets the report. I think it's like in the next week or so. So have no worries, you will get the report, and it does make very interesting reading. And for me personally, I want to say thank you to everybody who's on in this roundtable. Thank you for your time, your attention, and if there's anything you would like to approach us about after the event, we'd be more than happy to engage with you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That was Mary Connor. She is the head of retail banking product management at Finastra. We will also joined by Idris Kulabai, the managing director for Finastra in Africa, as well as Paula Zuccotti, who is a designer, ethnographer, trends forecaster, and visual artist, and the author behind that fantastic report that you saw a few clips from. I must say, I see a lot of reports. I'm very interested to see the final report. As I said in the beginning of my introduction, this is very important. Financial enablement is incredibly important. I recently watched a talk by Malcolm Gladwell. He was speaking at Microsoft about 10 years ago. He pointed to a Harvard study that correlated the success of poor people in the US with literally how people in their lineage were able to access financial services, land, things like that. There is a direct correlation between individual success and access to banking, access to capital. And of course, the great barriers up to this point have been kind of the processes involved. Digital is opening that up. It's a whole new world. We were not able to unpack all those points here. I would have loved to talk a bit more about Stockfels and some of these other enabling measures. Maybe in the future, we can have another webinar where we can touch some of the new emerging areas, mobile banking, all of that, and really how do we educate customers through that. With that being said, though, thank you very much for your time and your patience. We are 6 minutes over. I realize all of you are very busy. So once again, thank you. Keep an eye out for that report. My name is James Francis. I was your MC for today's roundtable, co-hosted by ITWeb and Finastra. So thank you for your time. Have a great afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Goodbye.